Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and today, for your viewing pleasure, we have Morka Dragon, or possibly Mauka Dragon, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, in the brand new, all-singing, all-dancing USS Minnesota Tier 9 US Navy battleship. There are 3 of these new battleships in the game. At Tier 8 we have the USS Kansas, which is generally considered to be pretty terrible. Here at Tier 9, the USS Minnesota, and at Tier 10, the USS Vermont. These ships are sort of, but not quite, what were known as Tillman battleships, named after Senator Benjamin Tillman, who authorised their design back in 1916 and 1917. What are we doing with First World War era battleships in World of Warships at Tiers 8, 9 and 10? That's a good question. Until now, Tier 8 was a pretty big step up in the US Navy battleship line in World of Warships because we finally got our hands on the North Carolina, a fast-ish battleship, which means we no longer have to suffer plodding along at around 20 knots in our New Yorks, New Mexicos and Colorados. The North Carolina obviously leads to the USS Iowa, which leads to the USS Montana, both of which are very mobile battleships with great guns and reasonable armour. And generally speaking, for all kinds of good reasons, once people actually get to the North Carolina at Tier 8, they rarely want to look back at the horribly slow Colorado. And yet that's pretty much exactly what these new battleships, and I use the word new in the broadest possible sense of the word, that's pretty much exactly what these new battleships are. They're First World War developments of the incredibly slow US Navy standard battleship types. Ships like the New Mexico, ships like the Colorado. What was it that possessed wargaming to think that people were getting tired of the mobility and manoeuvrability of the North Carolinas, Iowas and Montanas of the world and wanted to go back to, well, this? The thing about the Kansas at Tier 8, the Minnesota here at Tier 9 and the Vermont at Tier 10 is that they're not exactly Tillman designs. I mean, they're clearly inspired by them. But some of the Tillman designs were absolutely outrageous, especially when it came to their firepower. The firepower is definitely the major selling point of these newish battleships. The Minnesota here, for example, is armed with 12 16-inch guns. That's a level of firepower that isn't going to be repeated anywhere else until you get to Tier 10. She also has very good torpedo damage reduction, 40%, which is going to come in extremely useful here because I'm pretty sure he's about to eat 2 torpedoes, with some assistance of course from the friendly shores preventing him from making the turn in time, but still 2 torpedoes, less than 12,000 damage. You get to the USS Vermont at Tier 10, and that's armed with 12 18-inch guns. It's fairly safe to say that these new battleships do not lack for firepower. And yet while these ships are clearly Tillman-inspired designs, they're not the actual Tillman designs that were laid down on paper in 1916 and 1917. The Minnesota here at Tier 9 most closely resembles the Tillman 1 or Tillman 3 designs, which were armed with the Minnesota's 12 16-inch guns, which as you can see are certainly capable of laying down the hurt if they hit the target. But the Tillman 1 was supposed to be capable of a top speed of over 26 knots, at least 3 knots faster than the Minnesota is capable of, and the Tillman 3, and I've no idea how given the limitations of World War I propulsion technology, was supposed to be capable of achieving a top speed of 30 knots. Both of which are speeds far beyond the capabilities of the quite frankly asthmatic USS Minnesota here in World of Warships. And some of those Tillman designs... oh, hang on a second. This could hurt. This could hurt a lot. If those are on target, not a single citadel, 20,000 damage anyway. That's the selling point of these ships, by the way. The firepower. But even the Minnesota's 12 16-inch guns, and the Vermont at Tier 10's 12 18-inch guns, yes, you heard that right, even that kind of firepower is pretty tame compared to what some of these Tillman designs were supposed to have. The Tillman 4, for example, was supposed to have 24 16-inch guns in 4 turrets. That's right, 6 guns per turret. How they were supposed to build them, I have no idea, but this is what the designs called for. The Tillman 4 Mark II was supposed to have 15 18-inch guns in 5 triple turrets. Unsurprisingly, none of those designs have made it into the game. But none of the Tillman designs have really made it into the game, because the ships that do have the correct number of guns for a corresponding Tillman design do not have the correct speed for the corresponding Tillman design. In all cases, the ships that we do have in game, the Kansas, Minnesota and Vermont, are noticeably slower than anything that they might have been based on. They do have very, very strong firepower, however, with a crushing amount of first salvo alpha strike damage, and I can see the Vermont in particular at tier 10 being an extremely popular pick in competitive in World of Warships, where you only get a couple of seconds to take a shot at a target before it disappears or gets into cover behind an island, and your alpha strike is far more important than your damage per second. So being able to deliver that big knockout blow with 12 18-inch guns firing at the same time, very important in competitive. In random battles, however, I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm sure that they're going to be attractive to some people, because the one thing that makes these ships stand out is the sheer amount of damage that they can get out in one go. But what exactly do you have to give up in order to get that? And the short answer to that question is, insert Thanos memes here, everything. We've already discussed the speed. If you're planning on going down this battleship line, get used to being the slowest battleship in every battle that you play, unless somebody else is also sailing one of these Tillman designs. And as for the firepower, which is nice, having the opportunity to be able to do that is always welcome, but you don't get to do it very often, because even the overwhelming firepower that these designs enjoy comes with a limiting factor. Actually, it comes with 2. The first is the reload. Up until now, we've been used to having a 30-second reload being the standard for battleships in World of Warships. Obviously, there are exceptions. Battleships like the Scharnhorst, for example, with comparatively lower caliber guns, do enjoy a faster than 30-second reload. The Tillman designs, however, the Kansas, the Minnesota, and the Vermont, have a 40-second reload. A Scharnhorst would be firing its 3rd salvo by the time the Minnesota was ready to fire its 2nd. The other downside to the firepower, as you can see from that somewhat underwhelming salvo against another tier 9 battleship, the German Frederick the Great, is the reduced armour penetration. And this is because, unlike the 16-inch guns on the Iowa and the Montana, which are 50 calibers long and fire heavyweight armour-piercing shells, the guns on the Minnesota are only 45 calibers long, and they fire a lighter weight armour-piercing shell, which means you're still perfectly capable of wrecking cruisers, but shots against battleships at perfect ranges offering perfect broadsides where you would reasonably expect to be able to instantly delete them often result in, well, things like that. On the bright side, she does have 38mm rather than the standard 32mm of armour, covering large portions of the hull and the deck, which is going to make her more resistant to high explosive spam, at least from light cruisers. On the other hand, she does have a massive superstructure and has an awful lot of upper deck real estate due to the fantastic width of the ship, both of which seem to be specifically designed for catching as many 8-inch high explosive shells as humanly possible. And even though that 38mm of deck armour is definitely going to assist when it comes to absorbing and negating the direct explosive damage of 152mm and below high explosive shells, but when you're in a girl as big, thick and slow as this, you're still going to catch a lot of those 152mm and below high explosive shells. And even if they're not going to be doing any direct damage, it does mean that you're probably going to be burning a lot more than most other tier 9 battleships would have any right to expect. And what exactly is it that battleships can do when it comes to being set on fire? hang on a second. Yes, Alaska, that's right. You turn that way. Nothing bad will happen. But yes, when it comes to having to deal with being set on fire a lot, what exactly can a battleship do? Well, it can absorb that damage with its large hit point pool, and the Minnesota has less maximum health than the Iowa in the first place, and it can repair that damage back with its damage repair party consumable. The Iowa's damage repair party heals 625 hit points per second over its 28-second duration. Although admittedly, that is with an India Delta flag. Without one, the Iowa heals back 521 hit points per second. Over the same 28-second duration, and also without an India Delta flag, the Minnesota only heals back 347 hit points per second. So that's an awful lot of stuff that you have to give up in order to be able to do things like that every 40, not every 30 seconds. Now, is it worth it? Well, my answer is going to be no. I couldn't go back to the horribly slow speed of the New Mexicos and Colorados of this world, but whether or not you are going to be able to put up with it is entirely a matter of personal preference. There are people who enjoyed playing the Colorado. Strange people. People with a lot more patience than me. If you're one of those people, busy playing your North Carolinas, Iowas and Montanas, hankering for the days when you were in your Colorados and New Mexicos and your turning circle was measured in postcodes rather than hundreds of meters, if you're the kind of person who suffers a nosebleed whenever you go faster than 24 knots, if your ship's refrigeration plant is on the blink and your only option in order to prevent the meat from spoiling is to get it all up onto O1 deck for an impromptu upper deck barbecue, then the Kansases, Vermonts and Minnesotas of this world may very well be just the kinds of ships that you've been waiting for. On the other hand, if you're not lucky enough to have unlocked William Halsey as the captain of your Minnesota, and you're not lucky enough to have just scored 5 kills in a random battle in World Warships, therefore activating the hit hard talent, or to put it another way, they're now only 2 seconds slower to reload rather than 10 seconds slower to reload than almost every other battleship in the game armed with the same caliber guns, then maybe you should consider sticking to your North Carolinas, Iowas and Montanas. And if you're wondering what happened to the Kraken Unleashed award, this is technically a test ship at this stage of development, and you cannot earn achievements on test ships. Otherwise that would have been a Kraken Unleashed. You certainly activated the talent for it. The one thing that I will say, hopefully without any fear of contradiction, although who am I kidding, this is YouTube, is that despite the limitations, Morka Dragon's been doing pretty well in this ship. I mean, there are downsides. I've just spent the best part of the last 13 minutes talking about them, but this kind of firepower is unparalleled. I mean, 12 16-inch guns at tier 9. When you get up to the Vermont at tier 10, you've got 12 18-inch guns. I mean, that's 3 more than the Yamato has, although they are slightly lower caliber. But it is a lot of firepower in one package, and that is definitely going to have its fans. And that's perfectly legitimate. Nobody can tell you what you can and can't like. I mean, you might like something that is objectively bad. That doesn't mean you're wrong for liking it. And I'm not saying that the Minnesota is objectively bad, but it definitely has limitations. There's a definite price that you have to pay to get this kind of firepower, and it's only fair that I make you aware of what that price is. If you believe that the price is worth paying, by all means, go ahead. Unfortunately, part of the price of playing the Minnesota is that you have to play through that thing, the Kansas, first. And the Kansas is objectively bad. It doesn't look too bad on paper. It has the same firepower as the Minnesota, 12 16-inch guns at tier 8, but the price you have to pay for that kind of firepower at tier 8 is just way too much. It's just as big and slow as the Minnesota. It has the same 40-second reload on its guns. The guns, however, couldn't hit the side of a barn from the inside. Oh, nice, kill number 7. Well done, Morka Dragon. The guns have horrific Sigma and accuracy ratings, And instead of the 38mm plating, the Kansas only has 32mm of plating, which means she's not only going to burn as much as the Minnesota, but she's actually going to take more damage from the high explosive impacts as well, not to mention the armor-piercing over-penetrations. The Kansas is a terrible ship. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't have torpedoes, which means that the torpedoes coming from the direction of the Kansas must be the last surviving enemy destroyer, the Grozavoy. How can that not have been a kill on the Frederick the Great? Yep, more torpedoes coming. Grozavoy is definitely over back in the other direction. Rear turrets are going to have a go. Come on. Kill number 8. Do it for Daddy. And remember, cool ships don't look at explosions. Yeah, there it is. That just leaves the Grozavoy. We know he's in that direction. And, well, when you've got a top speed of 23 knots, the only way you're going to find that Grozavoy is if he wants to be found. He's already missed with the torpedoes. I thought that the Grozavoy was just thinking, screw it. Enemy team's almost reached 1,000 points. There's only a couple of seconds of this match left. Doesn't matter if I die. Let's pad out my damage stats before the end of the battle. But then it looks like his brave pills wore off, because after getting hit, he immediately smoked up. Not that it would have made any difference, because by the time Morka Dragon was ready to fire again, the team reached 1,000 points, and the battle ended. So, the USS Minnesota, Tier 9 Tillman design US Navy battleship, is the price that you have to pay for having that much firepower in a Tier 9 battleship worth it? You be the judge. Well done, Morka Dragon, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.